Blessed love and greetings, everyone. Welcome to Raising Excellence, one of the most valuable hours of your day. I'm Dennis, your guide for today's adventure, and this week is all about finding freedom. Today's show, particularly, is called Ready for Full Spectrum Freedom. Let's meet my fabulous co-hosts. We have Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator.
Hi, nice to see you.
Then there's Willow, our trauma consultant.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here tonight.
And Michael, our opportunity ambassador.
Hello, everyone. It's glad to be here. Welcome to Raising Excellence.
So glad to be with you too. Thank you for sharing your valuable time with us. And finding freedom. Well, why are we not looking for freedom? Why are we finding freedom this week? Particularly, I enjoy finding stuff instead of searching it. So I'd even prefer to have a finding engine instead of a searching engine, because it probably would be faster to find stuff. So I enjoy, tweaking words from now to then to kind of, even subliminally train myself to find stuff and to actually say and use the words, that will guide me where I want to reach. Full spectrum freedom. What does full spectrum ring anything for you guys?
Like total and absolute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, reminds me of like holistic, being like the whole picture.
Yeah.
The whole spectrum.
That's exactly what it meant for me too. There was something else though, like when I came across this full spectrum thing, I was reminded on an article that I read, and that was about full spectrum dominance. That was a few years ago, and I actually looked it back up, and that just sprang to my mind, and I thought, wow, this full spectrum dominance. Have you guys come across that before, or have you heard about that full spectrum dominance?
Certainly, it's a military term.
Yeah, it's a doctrine actually. It's a doctrine, a military doctrine, American military doctrine that was issued by the by the U.S. government a few years back, and it's all about new global security environment, and that's a doctrine that will guide America into this new world, new global security environment. And I thought, wow, it doesn't really sound healthy to me. It doesn't sound like anything like I'm looking forward to. So I thought, what would be a good alternative to that? And if they're coming down with a full spectrum dominance, then what could be better than full spectrum freedom? And
Amen.
So that is something I've been really like looking into heavily, like for quite a few years now, and many aspects of my life really have been impacted by that finding freedom, by that search for freedom, and also by that longing for freedom. And especially on the last show for this week, I'll be happy to go a little deeper into that. But for now, I'd like to just continue to dive a little bit into the etymology of the word freedom, to define the terms, what we are talking about really. Does any of you have any of you ever looked into like the word freedom, where it comes from, what it really means, what it stands for?
I had I'd say probably like 2 or 3 years ago, my husband and I were debating the difference between the words liberty and freedom from an what's the word, etymology standpoint. It's not the right word, but I don't know how to.
That's the right word.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the conclusion was. All I remember was we decided we liked liberty over freedom. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Liberty, that goes back to the Latin base of the word libertas, as far as I remember, and also interesting the link to libro, the same base of the word, which refers to books actually, which is interesting in itself. And in German, freedom means Freiheit, and there's a old High Germanic base or root for that word, Friheit. And well, Freiheit is something in English you would say it's the power of, it's also defined as the power of self-determination. It's also the state of your free will, which is interesting. That free will comes up in the definition of that. And it also can be defined as the...
Hang on. The state of your free will? So your free will is not something that's fixed, it's something that's malleable?
That's interesting in itself, isn't it? So,
well, if you don't
in other
use
words,
it, wouldn't it be like any other thing that we possess, like our bodies and our minds? It would atrophy.
Maybe.
I mean, even the brain has neuroplasticity in the brain is its ability to change, which can be measured. There's got to be some correlation.
Right, and if you don't use
Great
it,
point.
then there might be others who might just jump in and want to use it for you or take it away from you.
Hey, Dennis, can you do me a little favor? Can you bring your camera down a little bit so I see less above your head? Because yeah, perfect.
Better?
It looked fine when we were just talking, but then with the bar, it was kind of funny. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's all good. You still look cute.
A couple years ago I was in a growing age, now I'm in a shrinking age. So,
wait, are you
the
talking
Latin
about the
roots-
state of the world or the state of your own being? Growing
Is there a
age,
difference?
we were in a growing age like 2 months ago, and now we're like in halting stage.
Oh, I was already back at freedom again. Is there a difference between our state of freedom and the state of the world? Anyway, so to be free or frei in German, in Spanish would be libre. Liberdade, that would be the word in Portuguese as well. So it also, it's Latin-based languages, so you can see the root of the word there. It also means to be independent, not to be captured. And also in Old High Germanic, it meant to be single, I guess you would say in English. So, to be, not to be married, to be free. And then I had a quote that I wanted to throw out at the beginning of the show too, which is from Khalil Gibran, and it is, "A man can be free without being great, but no man can be great without being free." What do you say to that?
Wow, that's a good one.
Khalil Gibran is pretty cool.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. That was like the textbook, the dictionary book, definition of the word freedom. So that's one thing, but what would it mean? I'm really interested in finding out, what does that word mean to you? We hear raising excellence. That's the theme that we gave us. We all have, we met each other through autonomy, which is autonomy, freedom. Well, is there a difference? So what does that really mean to you? What does freedom mean to you personally in your life? Are there like marking moments in your life that you felt totally free? What happened then? Is there anything you can share, you want to share, that really impacted your life in terms of freedom? Is there anything, that really has marked your life and that brought you and that shaped you into who you are right now?
I'd say property rights is the first thing that comes to mind when I think of like freedom, or in my household we just usually say liberty. It always goes back to, I own myself, I own my property, and I get the final say of what happens with that property. And then realizing that I also have the responsibility of the consequences of that, good or bad. It took me a long time to get over the negative connotation to the word consequences, because I grew up in a household where it was now you have to face the consequences of your decision, and they were never good consequences. Where were the good consequences? Do we get to those? Is that like another chapter?
We just don't label them consequences. We label them whatever, rewards or something. Yeah.
Or
But
you don't
there are-
label them as good or bad, right? It's just the consequences are the consequences.
They just are.
Yeah, because even we, we change our views, we change all the time. The things that we labeled good 10 years ago, we might label them bad right now, whatever it is. But to accept that there are consequences is like, what you reap is what you sow. So that's just that. And then maybe it's not so important to label them at all, but just to accept that there are consequences, and whatever you do, every action, there's a reaction to it.
Yeah, just the idea of being free takes me back to what do we have the right to make complete and what's the word? Total control over. That's the only thing in the world we have total control over is our property and ourselves. And you can't be free. You can't know how to treat other people unless you know how to treat yourself, okay?
I thought the only thing we had total control over was our reactions to things.
True.
Because I don't really know if we have our total control over our property. Because, like, if there's an earthquake or whatever, we have no control over our property.
Well, what I'm saying is you have total control over what is done with it. Like,
not really. If the sinkhole eats my car, I gotta have no control over it.
So do you have total control over your reactions though? Aren't there reactions like instinctive reactions or things that, you even subconsciously do that you consciously not even notice?
So what you're saying, I have no total control over anything? Because if I have no total control over my reactions, then, like, what about my mouth? I have no control over it at all. Like,
I would say it's probably undisputable that you have total control over your actions and reactions to things.
Then it's just supposed you don't.
If a sinkhole pops up in your backyard,
you have the potential of that. I don't necessarily know if you actually do, because certainly everybody is, there are people programming and conditioning us. There are people that are influencing us. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it too, is you do have the potential to have much more control over your life. You should have total control over your property. Property rights, to me, is what kind of makes me mad when I see like asset forfeiture. And I'm like, that's not at all, that goes totally against property rights. And I don't know how to tie this back in.
So owning property for you, is that like that gave you a feeling of freedom? That is what gives you a feeling that that makes you feel free?
It's not necessarily the property itself. It's the idea behind property rights. Like, I have the right to, if I buy something and someone walks by me and just jerks it out of my hand, I can almost guarantee you no one's going to stop me if I chase him down and, punch him in the head and steal my money back. I have the right to defend myself. I have the right to defend my property. So I have the right to make the choices about, what goes on with my property. Now, whether that's enforced or that actually happens, that's a little bit different. But I still have the right to make the choice. That's what I was talking about. That it kind of empowers people that, yes, you have the right to your body. You have the right to tell a doctor, no, do not put that medicine into my veins. I do not know what it is. I have not researched it. I don't want it. But yeah, like, we are very conditioned. It's almost procedure, like standard procedure when you go in to have like a serious medical procedure done, that they put like the port in your arm where they can just inject the IV. They put it into your arm, where like, no, they can actually put a port in there to where when they come in, they can actually inject it into your veins, but you have control over that. I never knew that existed. But I think when I think of freedom, I don't necessarily think of owning property. I think of, I have the right to acquire things that help me in life. I have the right to make something, like I can go out and make friends, and I can make deals, and I can work for stuff, and I can put things together, and I can create something. And then I get a say on how all of that happens because I'm the one doing it.
That right is, where did you get that right from?
I currently, if obviously you're asking me right now, if I'm answering as my current self, I was born with it. Now, if you had asked me that a couple years ago, I wouldn't have known I probably would have told you government, to be honest. I probably would have, like, by way of saying, well, the Constitution guarantees these rights and we're given these rights. And before that, it would have been by God, because I was very religious. So, like, that has changed. But now I see children trying to enact, do these things in school, and they're punished for it, and then they're developing psychological problems because teachers are not letting them actually be a human child.
So the awareness of that right is something that brought you, that gave you a sense of ownership over your body, over your property, over the things that you earned, that you possess, and that gives you a feeling and a sense of freedom.
Yes. Once I got over the very angry phase that followed the fact that, I had these rights and someone took them away, there's a good period of just straight anger before any rational, coherent thought can be had about, like, what that does for me and what that means for my future. But yeah, once I reached that stage where I was like, I have the power to choose these things, it changed the playing field. There was a whole different level that I had to go up to.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Agnieszka, how is that for you? How do you define freedom in your life?
I don't know.
Moments?
It's interesting because it's very different to how Willow defines it, because I don't really consider property to be mine. Like, there is property and I use it, but I sort of kind of feel that I'm borrowing it from the universe, and if it ever craps out or leaves me, then it come to term, and then I'll get new property. I don't have any kind of idea of collecting things, hoarding things, and then keeping them to myself. Like, I basically feel like, it comes, it goes, new one comes, it goes, new one comes, not a big deal. And so where that freedom is something that I've kind of always carried with me. And I, when I was very religious and the priest said, this is true, I was like, well, okay, this is true, but this is not true, so I'm not going to believe that, okay? And I would actually negotiate with them what I didn't think is, like, Jesus would never say that, so I'm not going to believe that. And so I think I came somehow with my own idea. So freedom is, to me, maybe having your own opinion about things, or allowing yourself to keep your own mind about certain things, as opposed to listening to this camp or that camp, maybe holding back and not believing any of them and just sort of taking in information.
Nice. So is that something, that definition of freedom, how you see it now, is that something that you always had as far back as you can remember? Or is that something that developed over time? And if so, were there, certain marking moments that, that kind of revealed that to you, or that brought you to that recognition?
Well, I'm Polish, so the whole freedom thing is like a very firm idea in the minds of the Polish people, because they've been messed with so much in the history, and the country being taken away and given back and taken away and given back 100 times over. So being Polish, you're very strong in the belief that you're a free person and you're not going to let anybody mess with you. But that's more like a subconscious thing that you're just, born into. You live in that soup as a child when you're in Poland, so it's normal. But at the same time, of course, as a teenager, I was susceptible to trends and trying to keep up with certain people who may have told me what to do, or what's good, how to be cool, how to be hip, whatever the words they were using. I wanted to be that. I wanted to be cool and appreciate it. But it didn't last very long. I went back to being myself within a couple years.
Michael, how is that for you? You're living in Acapulco, in Mexico. Your whole lifestyle is designed around the concept of anarchy, around the concept of freedom. You must have had some really interesting experiences around that.
Yeah, well, I think I do feel like I've always had a pursuit of freedom. I felt like I think like for me when I was a child, I loved racing motorcycles. Motorcycles, I had to have one, and my father finally bought one for me when I was like 4 years old. And as soon as I got on it, I felt this like freedom, like you put a gallon of gas in the tank or however much I could get in that little thing.
Did you just say you were 4 when you got your first or
Yeah.
motorbike?
Yeah, I couldn't even ride a bicycle, and I had to have a motorcycle. My father would set me up on the motorcycle, and he said, "If you can touch your feet to the ground, I'll buy it." And I couldn't, and so he thought, maybe it's going to be like 6 months or a year or two before I can grow that much. And it was like every day I was annoying him. Can you take me down to the motorcycle shop? Because I'm going to like measure myself again. I'm trying to grow as fast as I can. But eventually I wore him down and he finally got it for me. So, to me, I think Americans in general, like the car is one where, to me, it is also like every time I would go to the gas station, I'd fill it up and I'd get to a full tank and I'd be like, I can go like 500 miles with this tank of gas. Where would I go? That is kind of that feeling of freedom. But honestly, what you mentioned, some of the words, the Spanish word libre, it is like the book, or the like libro, I think is Spanish for book. And to me, that's knowledge, and really knowledge is like awareness. And a free person, a free mind is one that is well aware, or greater aware than most. And that's really I think the beautiful thing is like the freedom really is like grasping knowledge, and being able to use knowledge almost like a Jedi to to just get around things and figure stuff out, and just always be more aware. And that's I think really that's the pursuit of freedom for me, is like always being so savvy and so knowledgeable that like the people, like the lower conscious minds, the ones that are always trying to bomb people and force people to do things, you can't, you can always get around them because they're in a lower frame of consciousness, they're in a lower mindset or awareness, and they just don't see the openings in the secret passages and the stuff that someone that's more aware sees.
What would the three of you, what kind of advice could you give somebody who says, I'm on a journey to freedom, towards freedom, which, I suggest we all are, independently if we are aware of it or not aware, like on whichever stage of development we really are. But I would suggest that, that ultimate liberation is where we're heading for, and the goal is the same for everyone. We're just, on different stages of that. So, all of you come from a distinct, different angle at that theme of freedom, which I think is really enriching, and it's really an opportunity for listeners, to compare themselves, to where you're coming from, and also to to get ideas and inspiration for their own journey. And if I'm on a journey to find freedom right now, is there any advice? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who says, I'm really looking for that? How can I tap deeper into that from your unique perspective and with your unique life journey and background? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who really wants to, improve and move forward on his particular way towards freedom?
I think that moving towards freedom is a challenging thing because you have to overcome inner barriers. Because freedom is truly being who you are, but often our surroundings and the people around us will have a great resistance to us being who we are, because everybody's striving to be who they are. And so if who we are is not exactly what they want to be, they'll always have an issue with us, because the way a lot of people look at each other, they're not looking at each other as independent entities. They're just looking at other people as a reflection of themselves. So a lot of people will have an expectation of their friends to have the same opinions, or have an expectation that their friends have the same political or sociological opinions, or follow the same rules, or things like that. Whereas in autonomy, especially, we're encouraged to have all sorts of opinions. Like whatever opinion you come with, that's the opinion you have. And so I don't have to be on the same page on anything with you guys to be your friend. Like I don't have to believe in the same religion or philosophy or morals or whatever, as long as I'm not doing any things that are deal breakers, like torturing small animals, right? We can just be friends. We can discuss it. We can interact with each other. We can even talk about the topics we disagree on in a respectful and adult manner. But as you're growing up, it's very hard to do that, because acceptance is the name of the game for a teenager. So how can you get acceptance where everybody's trying to get you to be like them? Not like you.
That sounds like a dangerous proposition that you're putting out there. Like if you look at history, people who voiced these kind of thoughts.
Yes, you're gonna get your ear cut off, live under a bridge, and die a horrible death. Yes, it's whatever. But you know what? It's still worth being who you really are.
Is freedom worth that?
My advice would be follow the same lines. I usually, in a topic like this, because it's such a generic, everyone's different, it's hard to really give advice, because no one really, you don't have that connection with people. So I always try to ask the question, like, what are you willing to sacrifice to get this? What are you willing to walk away from? Because if that feeling of being free isn't worth walking away from all this stuff, you're gonna be in a really bad spot. It's gonna suck, even worse than it has to. It's already gonna be really difficult and challenging. You're gonna have to walk away from a lot of stuff and a lot of people, and a lot of people are gonna walk away from you. And that's probably the hardest part, is when it's not even your choice. There's just people that you care about, you want in your life, and they don't. They just walk out.
But it's okay, because if the people don't get you and they don't appreciate you for who you are, you should not really, like, if they're really causing conflict, why trade? It's like that bakery thing. I never understood the bakery thing. And I know that
this is much more personal. I'm talking much more personal than the baker down the street. I'm talking like your friends and family, like people that I noticed when I started along me and my little sister are very similar. We've been through some similar situations, and I've noticed that we both picked different paths to healing. Maybe we're just we're on the same path, and we're at like different stops, and we stopped at different locations along the way. I don't know. It seems like it's two different paths.
Something you said a while ago I thought was really profound, which is questioning how much is one willing to give in order to get freedom, which is the theme for today. So it's like someone going to the fountain and wanting to drink all the water that is there in the fountain, but he only brings a tiny spoon to drink from it. So like how much are you willing to give up also to be free and to free yourself? And that, I think, is really a profound question to ask. Michael, how much are you willing to give to free yourself?
All of it.
I'm all in. I absolutely, I wrote down a couple things. One is there is several books that really, I think, impact me, as far as like if I was explaining to somebody else, I would say, take a look at this book, read this book, and let's talk about it. And that one of those books is called The Discovery of Freedom by Rose Wilder Lane. That book, there's several things in there that to me really describe it, but I would say, just to be really brief on it, is freedom is really the ultimate when it comes to like our realizing our own potential. We really can't do it without freedom, and that is, that's why it's so damn important. We to find our own purpose, we've got to have the freedom to like try what things we like, and do it in our way, to get to the point that we know what's really our purpose and what's important to us. And I think there's some great stuff in that book. The other thing is, living in Acapulco, I'm reminded of this every day, because I think this is one of the freest places on the planet, but it does require responsibility, and really kind of assuming authority for oneself in its entirety, full spectrum authority, where it's me, this is my life, and I'm doing it, whatever that is, it's all me. And I do believe in community, of course, but that's like individual. I guess I would define that as individual assertiveness, like the person that you want to be, raising that to the maximum is your responsibility. But it's also your, but responsibility is a big thing, and for a lot of people, a lot of people have been taught that responsibility is something that you don't want. But unfortunately, that is what you want, because if you're going to be free, it means you're going to have to take it all on your shoulders to some degree.
So basically, take self-responsibility for freeing yourself on your journey. How can you do that? How can you take self-responsibility? What does that mean on a daily basis for you?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this answers the question, but I've been on a Harriet Tubman kick lately. I love, since we're talking about freedom and, historical figures, it's one that many of our viewers will be like, oh yeah, and I've heard of her. I found out she had narcolepsy, same as me. And that was really cool. There was a couple of little blurbs about how people would talk about they were on the run, and all of a sudden she'd just collapse and sleep for a couple hours, and they'd huddle around her and scared to death that they were going to get caught. But one of her famous lines was, I'm gonna live free or I'm gonna die. Like, I will live free, or something's gonna take me out. And she was willing to extend that to, she rescued I think she rescued her 70-year-old parents after 9 or 13 trips. The numbers kind of vary between sources. But she was willing to risk everything. Even with a severely, she had cataplexy as well, which 70% of people with narcolepsy have cataplexy. And that's what you see in the movies when they pass out and it looks like they're asleep. She had that. And being able to risk everything, your freedom that you just won, to go back and extend this to other people, and taking responsibility for your own actions, because at times she was actually at odds with the railroad. They were like, no, please stop going back to the South, please stop doing this on your own, no one's gonna help you, you're gonna die. But she assumed responsibility for her entire. The one thing I can't fault her because I don't know her, but she carried a gun, and supposedly she used it on she didn't use it. She threatened one of her party members because they got really scared and they wanted to go back, and they would have gotten them all caught. And she assumed the responsibility for the entire group. And she was like, you signed on to this. You will either continue and you will live free, or you will die, because that was the contract that we made verbally when you decided to come on this mission. But I think the number one lesson that I learned from all of the research into her was fear is your absolute enemy. And you're not going to get any closer to freedom and unless you face that fear. Even if you're terrified and you're shaking and you piss yourself on the way to go deal with this, at least you're still dealing with it. Go carry an extra pair of pants. It's scary. Let's
Or a
stop
towel.
being so ashamed because you're scared.
So what does it mean to take self-responsibility to manifest freedom, to reach freedom in your own life? What I hear is the willingness to risk everything, if need be, for that, and to go beyond your fear. So don't let
Exactly.
fear stop you on your journey. Nice.
You know, that's kind of what 8-year-old Agnieszka can still teach me, because she went up to that priest and she said, you know what? I don't believe that. And the risk as an 8-year-old in Catholic country, right, was like eternal damnation. But she was like, there's no way that Jesus said that. I'm not going to say that. That's not right. And I had this guy, like I had a bunch of points and I was grilling him. What about this? This is not right. What about this? This is not right. You know what I mean? So let's learn from that. I'm not saying I'm that cool. I'm just saying, wow, as a kid, you have a lot of gumption. Like,
What
Yeah,
did
because there's a lot of kids who would get one bad reaction, or even quite a few bad reactions. They're told that they're sinful, they're blasphemous, they're going to hell, or they're just a bad kid because they're asking these questions and having these doubts. It really conditions you to not try.
and I absolutely did, because I had a big conflict with my main priest, who I didn't get along with. And that's why I went over his head to his superior, because I was like, well, this guy doesn't know anything.
At 8 years old.
I never would have been allowed to be.
I wasn't allowed. I was totally failing religion because this priest was such a jerk, and I don't deal well with jerks because I'm a little bit asshole-ish. And so I was like, well, this is nonsense. And so then I just wrote down all my questions by myself. I showed up at the other guy's office and I demanded entry. Like, my priest had no idea. It was during the day when he wouldn't even be there. I think I skipped school for it too.
you said something earlier, and you just reminded me about that, which is when we were talking about freedom in your life, how it manifests. You said you go within. So when you look for freedom, you go within. I found that remarkable as well, and I was just reminded about that. The book that talks a lot about Jesus supposedly also tells you to seek the kingdom of God within yourself, not outside in a church or in other people's ideas or concepts, but within yourself.
But before we go to Michael, because I know he's got a bunch of notes and he's like waiting, but I'm not all that cool because I'm still a slave to my own emotions. If I get emotional,
Be careful. You said that.
well, it's something I'm actually actively working on, right? I don't want my emotions I don't want to be the newspaper in the wind with my emotions. But essentially, whenever we lose our shit, we are the newspaper in the wind, right?
I actually had a question that I wanted to. This actually pertains to a little bit about freedom. I think it might be something that we're holding ourselves back. I never used to believe in the theory that, like, if I were to say, I'm hesitant to say it out loud because of what I'm thinking. If I say, I'm just born of bad genetic material, that actually made me like, please, I didn't mean it. I love you. It's okay. That has a negative effect on your body. So that's when Mike was saying, don't say that, be careful. I used to be like, oh man, like, if that's how you're feeling, that's okay to express. I've tried to take extra steps to say, I am feeling like this. A part of me is feeling, and not making, I am. This is what I am. I am a slave. Like, because then you start thinking, and I am a slave mentality. It's more of I have been trained to be a slave.
Yeah, that's why I said sometimes I'm still a slave to my emotions. Because it doesn't happen all the time. But sometimes the emotions govern me instead of me governing them. Like that whole amygdala hijack thing. Still going within, right?
How is that for you, Michael? Do your emotions take over as well sometimes?
No, he's a saint.
Of course. I think we all have that. I think that's one of the things that they take advantage of. It's a weakness that we have, and that is our emotions can get the best of us. But in regard to your question about how do you do that, I am thinking of another book that I just absolutely love, and it brings a tear to my eye whenever I think about some of the things in this book, and it's Booker T. Washington, Up from Slavery. You know, it's the account of him as a young, you know, essentially child that is a slave that becomes free, and then his journey to become a free man, you know, and a very powerful man, you know, in the end. But it is like he ends up, like, his family basically rounds up enough money and tries to send him to a school, and he doesn't even make it with the money that he's got. He only makes it like halfway, and he has to work and he has to struggle and he has to borrow and people help him, and he gets all the way to school, and then he needs to pay for school, you know, and he doesn't have that, so he ends up working as a janitor. But in doing so, he learns from one of the headmaster, which is a retired army general, and he basically, you know, teaches them, like, this is the standards that you keep yourself to, you know. And like, they, even though their clothes were tattered, they would sew them up and make sure all the buttons were on and stuff like that. And that's, you know, holding yourself to a higher standard is ultimately the best way that you can raise the bar for yourself as far as freedom goes. And I'm telling you, if I read that book, and I'll read it again, it makes me cry to feel that, you know, how powerful that was for him. And then, you know, in his situation as a boy turning into a man and coming from being a slave to being a free man, it's almost got me right now.
Can you
super
repeat
powerful.
that quote?
So in other words,
up from slavery.
No, can you repeat that quote? Holding yourself to a higher standard is what?
Well, it is ultimately, you know, it's like your daily practice to raising the bar for yourself, you know, holding yourself to a higher standard.
It's an inside job, isn't it? So freedom really seems to be an inside job. It's what Agnieszka was pointing to earlier as well. So it's not the clothes, it's not the cars or the physical state that you're in, but it's really something. It's a posture on the inside. It's an awareness.
A stance.
On the inside.
Oh, that's what our Raising Excellence motto was. We stand in readiness, right? Mm-hmm. So the Latin phrase, right? Here we stand.
So on the contrary, then there is this slightly famous man from Jamaica who sang some songs some time ago, who sang, "No shackles and chains around my hands and feet, but I'm still not free."
Oh, you said so there was a famous man from Jamaica, and I was singing Dennis Eckert.
You haven't heard
me singer? He was a singer, right?
He's talking about Bob, not Dennis.
We didn't.
Of course. So he was saying, "No shackles and chains around my feet, but I'm still not free." So does that mean then that to be not free, to be captive, to be enslaved, also has not only to do something with the outside shackles and chains, but can also be something, you know, something that chains our mind, that chains us, that chains our being, that keeps us captivated somewhere. And I found it really amazing because, like, I was mostly just, you know, leaning back and listening to you guys, and it was really super interesting. And I was just like, you know, smiling because the whole theme is really full spectrum freedom, and you have covered that full spectrum really neatly. So where I really wanted to go is to cover the full spectrum, all the aspects, the holistic aspects of that, because we started out with full spectrum dominance, and that, you know, in their military doctrine, that means to dominate everything and everybody in every possible way, like, you know, military might by air, sea, land, or economically, even mentally, the ether, through the internet, through, you know, media.
If you had used the term total war, I would have been like, I get you. I know exactly
that's
what
pretty
that
much
is.
it. If you read the paper, then that's what it's really about. It's to dominate everything, everybody, everywhere in space, and even beyond. So that's what all of this is about. So full spectrum freedom. Then I put this little picture out, which was highlighting some of those energy centers that we have, that goes back to a yogic tradition, really like 1,000 years old tradition, stemming from India. And I thought that was a nice way of depicting an holistic approach. And so for me, like looking at the full spectrum means to look at everything that you guys mentioned in many different ways. That means to look at the body, the physical body. What does it mean to be free physically, to be able to walk here and there and to move freely, to beyond borders that certain people put up, trying to tell us that we can't walk over here and over there because our little passport doesn't allow. So, what does it mean to be free on an emotional level? Agnieszka was mentioning that she's sometimes overwhelmed by emotions. I think all of us are, when emotions take over. What does it mean to be free on a social level? We're social beings as well. What does that mean? Like, are we locked down, by our social environments, by the people that we're engaging with on a daily basis, or are those relationships that we have something that brings us forward on our path towards freedom? And then also we are intellectual beings, so our mind, what's on our mind all day long? Are those thoughts that free ourselves, that help us move forward toward our goals, or is it something that keeps us locked in, that keeps us separated from who we truly are? And then
this is like the next level from how you spend your time, is how you spend the time in your thoughts.
And then the next one above that, if you will, you could extend it to a spiritual realm as well. So if we're not only physical, emotional, mental, intellectual beings, then are we also spiritual beings? Are we something that is even beyond all of that we can see and touch and feel? And then what does it mean to realize our true self, our true being? What does that mean? Is it maybe that our true freedom really lies within that? And how can we tap into that? How can we find that on a daily basis? But also how can we holistically, how can we design our life, and how can we attend to the full spectrum, to the full entire being that we are? Because we still live in the world, but do we have to be of the world? Is it possible to live in the world and to accept what's going on, the corona thing, and panic, and everything that's going on in family and children and job and stress here and this and that? But so can we accept the role that we play within all of those on all of those stages? Can we accept the role? But can we retain part of ourselves that is not the role we played, but we are not?
So it's
the
funny
isness of us is beyond that.
Because we just had a comment from Periscope from a listener who says, "What's up with this dude's beard? We're talking about freaking freedom. Freedom! Jesus. Like, really, seriously, we're talking about freedom. And this dude is asking, what's up with somebody else's beard? Like, you can't put whatever you want on your face? Like, seriously. You can't just, I can't just put whatever I want. I can't have blue eyeshadow because somebody's going to say, oh, what's up with her blue eyeshadow? I can't have purple. I can have whatever I want on my face. That's what
Maybe it was a compliment.
Freaking.
Maybe it was like, dude, what is up with this guy's beard? It's awesome.
Oh, maybe.
No,
it is awesome.
Manolo, you forgot the awesome part.
Yeah, I have this theory that there's a lot of people that just fit into character slots. So you have a certain amount of character slots, and you meet people with different names, but they're like, oh, that's a Chad, or
oh, that's it. Those are Jungian archetypes, love. Jungian archetypes, right? The little slots we can jump from one to the other, move as we want. Sorry, Manolo, I didn't mean to make fun of you, but it just sounded like it.
But you have to go through and read it in all the different voices of the different kinds of people, and you're like, one of those has got to feel right.
So, Manolo, can you provide a clarification, or did you already leave? I don't know.
Anyway,
there's no
full spectrum dominance to full spectrum freedom, to the freedom of growing hair on our faces.
But some people don't have. I object. I have no freedom of growing hair on my face. What do I have to do?
So are you guys
I'm okay with
ready?
that because I am really not liking the couple little hairs. I feel like my grandmother, where I'm like plucking them out. I'm like, oh, I used to watch my grandmother do that when I was a child. Now I'm doing it. No. So you can keep all the facial hair, and I'm lucky that does not. I just thin. I don't go bald.
So that will fit perfectly in today's exercise. You guys ready for that?
Oh no.
How?
How does that? It's highly complicated.
You'll find out. Shush, Sagittarius.
So we're talking about hair. So that would be the physical realm. So the exercise is going to be till Wednesday to figure out just five realms of freedom. One is the physical, the other one is the emotional, the next one the social, the intellectual, and the spiritual level. And the idea really is to you just take a piece of paper and you draw a line, and if the left end of the line is where you're coming from and the right end of the line will be your goal. So your task is to define the goal, to define what does physical freedom mean for you individually. And and that actually leads us perfectly in the end of today's show, because we're going to talk about journaling, right? So
but
make that
you're going to give
us
written directions for this exercise.
No, for today is because it's so highly complicated.
The line and the goal
is a line that goes from one side to the other side. So I thought we could handle that even with no verbal direct.
But what's the goal? The goal is
what was the five things again?
The 5 ones. Okay, so the first one is the physical.
Okay.
So what does it mean to you to be physically free? If you think about, your physical manifestation, your body, what is your goal? Where do you want to reach in terms of, freeing yourself on that physical level for your physicality? And that's the goal we are. The second one would be the emotional one. What are you looking forward to? What is the goal in terms of emotions? Agnieszka mentioned, sometimes she feels overwhelmed by emotions. Like, maybe one of her goals is, to come into a place of being, to be into a continuous state where she can use emotions for her full benefit, where she's not overwhelmed, but where emotions are being used in order to advance on the journey instead of being locked down. Maybe that could be an example for phrasing, like a goal on that level. The social one would be the next one. Number 3 is the social one. How would you define your ideal state in a social setting, in a social way? A social being, like your relationships with your family, with other people, with your neighbors. How do you see yourself ideally living in an ideal world, in your ideal world, living free on that social level? And the next one would be the intellectual level. Your thoughts. Have you achieved that already? Are you completely free? Have you freed your mind? Are you enjoying that sense of freedom, or are you locked down? Is there something that you can improve? How would it look ideally if you were free, if you would free yourself completely on that intellectual level? And then the last one would be the spiritual level. What kind of thoughts do you have? What comes to mind or beyond the mind, so to say, on that spiritual level? What would that mean for you? And maybe that last one is not even, because I said already what comes to mind, but maybe that's really beyond the mind. Maybe that's something, where we actually consciously try to not be in the mind, but to be beyond the mind. And let's just see and make that the task for the next podcast, and see what we come up with. And of course, this would be an exercise primarily for yourself. So don't limit yourself in terms of what comes up and what kind of things you have, because obviously it's not, you wouldn't be asked to share anything that you don't want to share with people. But if there's 1-2 things interesting that you're willing to share, I'm sure that would be interesting, maybe for our listeners as well, to compare. And then we're gonna move on with some additional exercises and in the next show on Wednesday, which will have the title "How to Really Free Yourself." And as the title indicates, it's all about wheels, and that's just another tool that I've been using for myself and that I found very helpful. Building a foundation and basically tapping into freedom, into holistic freedom. And that being said, I will also encourage all of us to maybe let that become an inspiration for our journaling exercise, our ongoing exercise. Does anybody want to share? Did you have anything particular interesting that you would like to share that came up lately with journaling?
Well, I'll start off this time. I would say that, I think this is a perfect example of exactly why building a habit of journaling is important, because of things like this, where, here's an exercise, here's a task, here's something that you can do. And it takes a little bit of time to think about and kind of roll through the concept. And then what would that mean, and defining those things and writing them down. That's all. Like, if you're accustomed to doing that via journaling, it's a heck of a lot easier. And so it just makes these type of opportunities even more powerful, important. But just in my general experience, because I'm doing this and because I'm coaching a lot of people on this idea, there's a lot of room for improvement, and there's always the opportunity to fail, where, oh man, I forgot to do it for a week, or man, I was so busy today, I just didn't write anything down, or I got up and there was already an emergency. That's okay. It's all okay. It's a matter of, every time that you don't get what you want, there's a reason why you didn't get what you want. And it's really, that's the key, is
And that's
finding
because
those
you
things
didn't do your
out.
journaling? Every time I don't get what I want is because I didn't do journaling? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying, if you want to journal every day and something is keeping you from journaling every day, you're talking about your willpower, and understanding that journaling is a very powerful tool
Yeah.
that an individual can use to improve themselves.
Well, thank you for that absolution, because I didn't do it for a week and I felt bad about it. But then you're like, even if you didn't do it for a week, you're still all right. And so I don't feel like I'm going to live under a bridge for the rest of my life. So thank you.
Well, I mean, the key is to discover what is it that's keeping you from, like, manifesting your own willpower.
Well, I had house guests and Eric's flight was delayed and I was an emotional slave.
I just assume that it's a part who doesn't want to do this exercise for an unknown reason. Maybe it's because if they start to open up and spill their guts, they're going to say everything that they've been trying not to say, or, like,
I think
there's many different reasons.
I think it's a part, but I think it's the part that hates doing something every day. I've been having a really
maybe
hard
there's
time.
a reason.
Well,
but that's actually, like, that can be good information and data to get from the journaling exercise, because then you get to know that part. You get to know that part does not like to journal. So then you'd be like, oh, hey, part that doesn't like to journal. One, do you have a name so I can stop calling you the part that doesn't like to journal? Okay, we're friends now.
But the part likes to journal. It likes to journal. It just doesn't like to do anything every day because it perceives that as slavery. I've mentioned that before. It's very interesting because I'm battling with that part right now for vitamins, because I want to take vitamins every day because of the situation or whatever, right? But it's like, no, you don't need vitamins every day. It's like, no, we're going to take vitamins. So I'm winning on the vitamin front. I'm failing on the journaling front. I'll get better. There's no...
The hardest part is to stop battling with them and make friends with them, but not let them take you over. Like, being friends with, like, a person who does crack and they're, like, always offering you crack, and you're like, no, man, I'm good. Thank you, though.
But maybe you can talk to that part and kind of point out all the things that part is already doing on a daily basis. Like, oh, thank you so much. You're tying my shoelaces every day. You're brushing my teeth every day. You're breathing in and out every day. That's amazing. Like, let's just add this little vitamin C to it every day. Not a big deal.
Oh,
That's a good idea because
That's
it
good,
acknowledges
that's
that,
good.
like, and it corrects the idea. Like, it gives evidence without saying you're wrong. It's like, oh, well, have you
So,
considered?
so what I can say to this part is like, oh, thank you very much for protecting me and for making sure I don't have the same breakfast every day and I don't have to do the same boring shit every day. But some things we don't do it because it's exciting. We do it because it's actually nourishing in the long term. So let's just try it today. We don't have to do it tomorrow, but let's try it today. Vitamins or
That's right now.
journaling.
Yes.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And then check in every day and be like, how do you feel today? That could be your exercise. And then in the journal,
Wait,
you
wait,
be
wait,
like,
wait,
hey,
wait, wait.
I talked.
Are you assigning me homework right now? Is this what's happening here?
It's not assigning. It's just a suggestion.
Oh,
If you
sure.
care enough about it,
I
you'll
know
pick it
your
up.
suggestions. I know you're kind.
It's an integration exercise.
I know you're kind too.
Yeah, honestly, I think this falls under the category of self-care. Like
Ooh.
premium self-care means doing what's absolutely best for you.
But when we care about someone, with the exception of what we've been conditioned to treat children as, when you have a friend who's not doing something that you know is, good for them, you don't force them. It's not your place. That's not your right to force that on someone else. And it's also like, if you try to force your parts of yourself to do things, they react just like anyone else. No, absolutely not.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that means you need to find the reasons, find the reasons that make sense to you, that are powerful for you, that make it a slam dunk, And I think that's, why I picked journaling as one of the first things that I point out, is because really there's just, it has so many benefits. It's just, it just makes sense, but it does take somebody time to figure out, oh, well, the way that I journal is I write my own story, and to them, once they figure that out, then, oh man, I can't wait to write my own story,
Yeah.
But until they find that out, or if they think it's like, like recording accounting entries or something like that, well, it's not going to be fun. But once they throw the art into it, oh man, I can't wait, So it is something that you have to make your own.
So two things, just quickly. I love the idea of premium self-care. I think one of our shows next week should be called Premium Self-Care. Just saying. Of course, it's not up to me.
We've already got what we got.
I'm just saying.
Next week.
And I just wanted to shout out to Adam. Thanks very much for your support and disciplines. Freedom through discipline is actually my numerological challenge and win at the same time, right? Freedom through discipline. So he wrote discipline equals freedom, which is pretty much the same thing. So thanks, Adam.
So I wanted to take back my words earlier, and I am actually giving you some homework.
Oh no.
What if?
Oh
what
no.
if? It's optional.
I don't like it already. Okay, I'm writing
You haven't
it
even
down.
heard it. What if your journaling exercise would be to have a conversation with the part who doesn't want to journal and write down their answer? So instead of journaling about how everyone else feels, maybe this part doesn't get a chance to journal. Maybe you skip over this part when you journal, and it's like, well, screw journaling. But if you're writing down what they're actually saying, what they have to say, and if they don't want to talk, you write down, that part didn't want to talk. I asked it why, it didn't answer. Said I wanted to go eat.
And I suppose you want me to take a picture of it and send it to you to make sure I did it. Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. I'm going to demand it every morning at 6 a.m. Please, God, don't text me at 6 a.m. I take that.
I can't. Your 6 a.m. is like my 3. It's not going to happen.
Hey.
Wow. Deep insights and wise counsel. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much to our listeners for spending your valuable time with us today. Our time has run out, so I'm looking forward to the next podcast on Wednesday. We are on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 7:30 p.m. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yes.
We are holistic beings on a journey to freedom. Let's address the task holistically as well and help each other along to reach that task.
Sounds
And
awesome.
That being said, thank you so much, everybody. It was a joy,
Thank
like
you.
always, to be with you, and looking forward to our next podcast. And there I shall be also sharing a link with you guys to get access to some additional tools that I've been putting together. And well, it's gonna get really nice.
Really nice.
Really nice.
Really nice. Okay, I'm gonna play the outro now. All right.
Sweet.
Bye.
Bye.
7:30
Bye, everybody.
7:30 p.m.
Thanks,
Wednesday Eastern, Wednesday and Thursday this week. Still talking about freedom. Bye.